Those of you who don't know me, my name is Russell Arnold. I've been a member at Church of Sandhurst for going on 10 years. And for the first 4 or 5 years, I was known as Cindy Jackson's brother, but I've kind of come into my own now, and now I'm my own person, I guess. And Tommy Bolger asked me to give my testimony because I've done it for him and Tim up in the youth group 3 or 4 separate times. And I don't know if I'm supposed to thank Tommy or what, but Tommy, I promise I won't confess any of your sins during my testimony today, because those of you who don't know, Tommy and I have grown up together since we were probably 11 or 12 years old. I want to talk to you today about my life and how I became a Christian. And it was a long, drawn-out process. It wasn't quite as spectacular, I guess, as Tommy has, where he got off the lawnmower and one day accepted Jesus. Mine went over about a 20-year span of, I guess, a lot of different tragedies that happened in my life. I grew up going to church every single Sunday as a kid, and I never got anything out of it. And when I went off to college, I didn't go back to church until I was an adult. And when I've spoken to the youth group, I talk about, I guess, the strikes or the bad things that happened in my life where the Lord was trying to pull me to Him, and I just wasn't listening. I was living for myself. It was all about me. So today I'm going to start my life pretty much around the high school years, because that's when I guess I started doing a lot of things I shouldn't have been doing. I partied on a regular basis, and I was no different back then really than any other teenage kid. But it was all about the partying. It was all about hooking up, seeing who could meet more girls or hook up with more girls. And this part of my life lasted for, until my late 20s. The Lord blessed me through high school. I was a good athlete, and I was asked to go play baseball at the Citadel, and I did that. And during all those years, many tragedies took place. My senior year after high school that summer, I was involved in a head-on collision on 301, and I walked away from it. And my friend and I had been out drinking all night, and we were hit by a drunk driver, and both of us thought it was funny, laughed about it, and walked away without a scratch on us, and it totaled his car. The next summer, and Tommy Bolger, I promised not to air out any of your laundry, but Tommy and I and another friend of ours were riding down 3rd Loop. We flipped an MG, and I was ejected from the MG on 3rd Loop right down from the church, and I stood up, had some cuts on me, but again, it was all about me, and I didn't hear the Lord, and I didn't turn to Him like I guess a lot of people would in an accident like that, and Lord, thank you for taking care of me. I didn't do anything. It was about me, how tough I was. I survived another accident. Well, after that, I went off to college and played baseball, and the Lord watched out for me all that time, but I never gave glory to Him. And I never looked at what the end result could be if I would have gotten in trouble back in those days. I do now, but back then, I never stopped to think, what if I went to jail? What if, I was in an accident and I killed somebody? It was never about that. It was all about me, and that's all I was living for. And, I went to the Citadel, like I said, and graduated and played baseball, and I love the sports, but my senior year, my fastball went from 92 miles an hour down to about 85, and I knew I was not going to get drafted. So I signed a military contract. So I went in the military as a second lieutenant, and my life was still about the party. I was very driven, and I was more into having a good time, I guess. I did a good job while I was in the military, but I was into having a good time. And I didn't really care who I stepped on or who got in my way. It was all about me. And the first year, about 8 months into the military, we invaded Panama. And when I speak to the youth group, those guys and young girls, they know nothing about Panama because they were too young. But the first night in Panama, tracer rounds were coming over our head on our position. And even then, I didn't give my life to the Lord. I knew to pray, and I thinking back, I probably did pray, Lord, keep me safe. But I wasn't living for Him. It was all about me, and I got a lot of awards from Panama and did a lot of great things, but it was still all about me, and I never gave God the glory. We came home from Panama, and the military was one big party, and about a year later, we invaded, I guess, Iraq. So I was on that deployment and did that for 8 months, and had a lot of great missions, and it was still, I remember reading my Bible when we were over there, but it was the old saying in the military is no atheists in the foxhole, and I guess I was classified as one of those type of people. I read my Bible every day, and because I didn't want to get killed in combat, and I did a lot of things while we were over there, and I was asked to be a general's aide, and that's one of probably the most prestigious awards you can get as a first lieutenant. And I went to New Jersey, right outside of Manhattan. I was a general's aide for a couple of years, and it was all about the party. I did my job during the day, and I partied all night long, and that's what I live for. Looking back, it's kind of a sad story, and everybody likes to hear a testimony, but it's, the best testimonies are the ones that people remained a Christian throughout their entire life. And those are the hard ones. Mine was the easy one because I lived the bad life. Shortly after I ended my 2 years being a general's aide, I got out of the military, and soon after that I was divorced. And Brooke, who is now 16, she was around 2.5, and I consider myself, looking back, I was a sorry father. And that opened my eyes, I guess, after the divorce. And Brooke stayed with me 2 to 3 days every week, and I put up a front. Cindy and Wick, my sister and brother-in-law, they were missionaries and really involved in Sandhurst. And back then I was Cindy's brother, and I came to church on the Sundays. I had Brooke, and it was all a front. And I would sit in church and look at the crowd and people smiling and shaking hands, and I would think to myself, these people aren't having fun. Their lives are boring. I know I had fun all weekend, but looking back now, I really didn't have fun, and their life, because they were living for Christ, was the life that I needed. And I still wasn't ready, but I put up the front, and I came to church every Sunday that I had her, which was 2 weekends a month. And one Sunday, Chip Holbrooks and Roxanne Holbrooks were sitting beside Nell and I, and Nell is my wife, and we'd been dating about a month, and we were sitting in church and had Brooke with us, and they asked us to go skiing down in Georgetown. So we jumped in the truck, and we drove down to Georgetown right after church. Well, about 7 o'clock that night, a drunk boat driver cut right through the middle of our boat. And Nell was ejected, and Mr. Benny, who was Chip's father, he was ejected out of the boat. The boat prop cut through my foot and broke my foot. And we had, I think, 4 children with us, and none of the children were hurt. And myself and Mr. Benny and Nell, we all went to the hospital that night. And that night I started thinking, maybe it's time for me to make a change. My life is going down a dead-end path. And I remember even actually praying or thanking God that I wasn't drinking that day, but we were hit by a drunk boat driver. And the next Sunday I couldn't go to church because I was laid in the bed, and I remember wishing that I could. And I think that's where my life slowly started to change. And over the next year to year and a half, the Lord slowly started nitpicking away at my life. Satan was still there, and Nell and I, we continued to date, and we would go out and we would party a little bit, but it was not to the extreme that I was doing before. Because before that, I guess for about 2 straight years, I was gambling and partying every single night that I didn't have Brooke with me. And I was just going down a dead-end path. And maybe the boating accident was my last wake-up call, and I don't know. And Nell and I got engaged, and I went and sat down with Pastor Bob, and he asked me the question. You and I are riding down 2nd Loop, and we just got hit by a car, and Jesus asked, why should I let you into heaven? I probably gave the same answer that didn't make a lot of sense, and it's probably because I'm a good person. Well, I know today that doesn't get you into heaven. And Bob asked me, was I willing to accept Christ that day, and I did. And I didn't leave Bob's house that afternoon with the feeling that my whole life has changed.